Imagine a continent alive with kingdoms and cultures where societies flourished under their own rulers and traditions were passed down through generations. Africa, before the arrival of foreign powers, was a tapestry of diverse peoples, languages, and civilizations, each with its own unique story and way of life. Then, in just over 20 years, nearly the entire continent was seized by outsiders. The transformation was swift and staggering, as ancient boundaries vanished and new lines were drawn by hands far removed from the land itself. This is the story of Africa's dramatic transformation between 1880 and 1914, a period when European control soared from just 10% to a staggering 90%, forever altering the fate of millions. The scramble for Africa was more than a land grab. It was a frenzied race among European powers, fueled by fierce rivalry, boundless ambition, and an insatiable hunger for Africa's vast resources. European nations, emboldened by new technology and a sense of imperial destiny, saw Africa as a prize to be divided among themselves. The people who called Africa home were rarely consulted, their voices drowned out by the clamor of conquest. In distant capitals like Berlin, leaders and diplomats gathered in grand halls, drawing borders with little understanding of the land or its inhabitants. These arbitrary lines sliced through ancient communities, splitting families and tribes and planting the seeds of future conflict that would echo for generations. What triggered this sudden and dramatic expansion? For centuries, Europe's presence in Africa was limited to a handful of coastal trading posts where goods and ideas were exchanged. The interior remained largely untouched. But by the late 1800s, the world was changing. The Industrial Revolution swept across Europe, bringing new machines, new ambitions, and a hunger for raw materials that could only be satisfied by looking beyond their own borders. Factories demanded rubber, copper, gold, and other resources, while nations craved prestige, power, and the promise of new markets. The competition for dominance became a driving force, pushing European countries deeper into the African continent. The result was a continent consumed by outside forces, its fate redrawn in a single generation. The impact was immediate and profound, as new rulers imposed their will and reshaped societies from the ground up. This is not just a story of maps and treaties, but of the powerful forces, political, economic, and human, that reshaped Africa forever, leaving a legacy that still shapes the continent today. The scramble for Africa was fueled by a powerful economic hunger that swept across Europe in the late 19th century. As the Industrial Revolution transformed European societies, factories multiplied and cities grew, creating an insatiable demand for resources. Europe's booming industries needed raw materials: rubber for tires, cotton for textiles, copper for wires and machinery. Africa, with its vast and largely unexploited resources, was seen as a treasure trove waiting to be tapped. Colonies offered more than just resources. They provided direct access to these materials and opened up new markets for European manufactured goods, ensuring a steady flow of wealth back to the continent. This created a deeply unequal system where the benefits flowed north while the costs were borne by Africa. But economics wasn't the only driving force. Political rivalry and national pride were just as important. In the age of empires, the size and reach of a nation's overseas territory became the ultimate measure of its power and prestige. Britain and France led the charge, carving out vast empires, while Germany, Italy, Belgium, and Portugal scrambled to catch up, each desperate for their own place in the sun. The race for colonies became a matter of national survival and honor. In this climate, not having a colony was seen as a sign of weakness, a failure to succeed alongside the ambition Europeans trapped in self-serving moral justification, the so-called white man's burden. They claimed a duty to bring civilization, Christianity, and progress to Africa. Missionaries and colonial officials insisted they were uplifting local societies, but beneath these claims lay a deeper agenda of control, resource extraction, and exploitation. The promise to end the slave trade and introduce modernity provided a convenient cover for domination. These justifications masked the reality of conquest and subjugation. In truth, economic gain and political competition were the real engines of the scramble, the ideology serving as a persuasive excuse for expansion. Africa became the stage for Europe's ambition. People and resources, pride, and dominance. The consequences of this scramble were profound and lasting, shaping the continent's future for generations to come. Britain was the dominant force, seeking to secure routes to India and expand its empire from Cape to Cairo. France, eager to restore its prestige after defeat by Germany, aimed for a vast west-to-east African empire. Their ambitions collided, leading to tense standoffs like the Fashoda incident. Belgium's King Leopold II claimed the Congo as his personal domain under the guise of philanthropy. Germany, a latecomer, grabbed territories in West, East, and Southwest Africa, challenging British and French dominance. Portugal and Italy sought to connect or expand their older holdings, while Spain clung to a few small enclaves. Each move triggered a chain reaction, as nations raced to claim land before it was gone. The Scramble was a chaotic contest of greed, strategy, and opportunism. As competition intensified, the risk of war among European powers grew. To manage the chaos, Germany's Bismarck convened the Berlin Conference in 1884. Contrary to myth, the conference didn't start the partition, it set the rules for it. 14 nations attended, but no Africans were invited. The fate of a continent was decided by outsiders. The key outcome was the principle of effective occupation. Powers had to physically control territory to claim it. This rule sparked a rush to establish outposts and administrations deep in Africa, accelerating conquest. The Congo Free State was recognized as Leopold's personal fiefdom, under the pretense of humanitarianism. In reality, it set the stage for brutal exploitation. The Berlin Conference legitimized the Scramble, unleashing a new wave of colonization. With the rules set, Europe carved Africa into over 50 colonies, ignoring existing cultures and boundaries. Britain claimed the largest share, from Egypt and Sudan to South Africa and Nigeria, fulfilling much of the Cape to Cairo dream. France built a vast empire across West and Central Africa, from Senegal to Chad and Madagascar. Belgium's Congo Free State became a massive, privately owned territory. Germany seized 4 colonies, Portugal tightened its grip on Angola and Mozambique, and Italy took Eritrea, Somalia, and later Libya. Spain held a few small territories. The map was redrawn for European convenience, not African reality. The consequences of these artificial borders would echo for generations. Amid the colonial takeover, 2 African nations remained independent: Ethiopia and Liberia. Ethiopia, an ancient kingdom, defeated Italy at the Battle of Adwa in 1896, a rare African victory over Europe. Emperor Menelik II's modernized army and political unity secured sovereignty and inspired the continent. Liberia, founded by freed American slaves, was shielded by its unique ties to the United States. European powers hesitated to challenge Liberia, wary of provoking the U.S. Yet, both nations faced external pressure and internal challenges. Ethiopia was later invaded by Mussolini's Italy, and Liberia became economically dependent on American corporations. Their stories highlight both resistance and the enduring reach of foreign influence. Independence was hard-won, but never absolute. Colonial rule brought exploitation and upheaval to Africa. European powers extracted resources, rubber, gold, diamonds, enriching themselves while impoverishing the colonies. New economic systems forced Africans into cash crop farming and dangerous labor, often through coercion and heavy taxes. In places like the Congo Free State, forced labor and violence led to millions of deaths. Land was seized for European settlers, displacing communities and creating deep inequalities. Traditional societies were disrupted, and African cultures devalued by colonial administrators and missionaries. Education served colonial needs, not local empowerment. The legacy: economic dependency, social fragmentation, and lasting trauma. The legacy of the Scramble for Africa is most visible in its borders, arbitrary lines that ignored ethnic and cultural realities. These borders, drawn with little regard for the people living there, continue to shape the continent's destiny today. They are a daily reminder of a past where outside powers prioritized their own interests over the lives and futures of millions. These divisions created states with dozens of rival groups, fueling conflict and making nation-building difficult. The forced coexistence of diverse communities often led to mistrust and competition, rather than unity. In many cases, traditional alliances were broken, and new tensions emerged, complicating efforts to build stable, inclusive nations. Ethnic groups were split across borders, while others were forced together, leading to instability and civil wars. structures served European interests, not African development. Railways and roads were designed to move goods out of Africa, not to connect people or foster local growth, leaving many regions isolated and underdeveloped. The imposition of foreign languages, laws, and governance created a disconnect between the rulers and the ruled. Many Africans were forced to abandon their own systems of justice and communication, making it harder to participate fully in public life. A Western educated elite inherited centralized, often authoritarian systems. These leaders, trained in foreign traditions, sometimes struggled to bridge the gap between important institutions and local realities. Indigenous cultures and knowledge were devalued, leading to deep psychological crisis. Generations grew up feeling disconnected from their heritage as colonial attitudes undermined pride in local traditions and wisdom. Overcoming this complex inheritance remains one of Africa's greatest challenges. Yet across the continent, people are working to reclaim their histories, heal old wounds, and build societies that reflect their true identities. The struggle for unity, identity, and self-determination continues as Africans strive to shape a future defined not by colonial legacies, but by their own vision and resilience. The Scramble for Africa was a rapid, dramatic transformation, an entire continent reshaped in a generation. Economic greed, rivalry, and a sense of superiority drove European powers to divide Africa, leaving a legacy still felt today. The Berlin Conference codified the partition, ignoring African voices and realities. Only Ethiopia and Liberia escaped, but even they faced immense challenges. Colonial rule brought exploitation, displacement, and deep scars, most infamously in the Congo. Today, Africa's borders, economies, and identities still bear the marks of this era. Understanding this history is essential to grasping the continent's present and future, a story of resilience, recovery, and the ongoing quest to reclaim agency and unity.